Testing 1, 2. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I will say Realocha. Does anybody in the room understand what that means? Realocha. Dumelang. Do we understand Dumelang? Molweni. Oh, you see, all right. So that's what you understand. A very good afternoon to all of you. My name is Kathy Mhlaba. Firstly, let me thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us this afternoon to be part of this very important conversation. The reason I begin with Realocha is to give you a sense of who I am. I might be in Xhosa land today in Gqeberha. I'm still working on getting it exactly right. In my other life, I host a show on radio every day, and there's some other fellow Xhosas who listen to the show, and they're always sending me voice notes. They're like, Kathy, it's not Gqeberha. And I ask them, like, what is it? And let's just say it's a work in progress. One day I will get there, but it has to do with the right emphasis on the right syllables is where I will leave it. So it's a pleasure for me to be in your company this afternoon as we have what is really a crucial conversation, especially given the kind of year we anticipate next year. 30 years is not child's play. I wonder what you expect of a 30-year-old male or female. At that point, you are considered an adult. The expectation would be that you have moved out of home. You maybe or may not have your own family, but certainly that you are able to function independently. Your parents are not expecting you to call them every other week asking, "Yo, mom, dad, please loan me some money." They believe that you are far beyond that. I wonder what the expectations then that you would have of a 30-year-old South Africa. Where are we? But most importantly, where do we believe we should be? These are the issues that we have to confront today. And it must be honest so that the next 30 years, if we are not where we are, so that the next 30 years can be a better experience. And I believe that we are having this conversation at one of the most appropriate locations. This is the testing ground for coalitions. I know the minute I say coalitions, people want to run away. It's become a swear word in this country. And I wouldn't blame many of us. I come from Johannesburg. I live in the city of Johannesburg. So as a resident, if you ask me my fair view of coalition, I have got nothing good to say. Why? Because while the politicians are fighting over positions, there are potholes that have not been repaired in my area for months and months on end. We have water outages that cannot be explained. Sometimes when the electricity goes and then you hear a substation has also just gone bad. So that means that you're without services for weeks and weeks on end. And it's easy for us to blame this nasty, scary, ugly word of coalition. But I believe that the municipality we are in, the Nelson Mandela Bay, it presents an opportunity, right? Because many of you know both the good of coalitions and most importantly, the bad of coalitions. And it's a conversation we must confront because as we go into the next year, coalitions could well be our reality, not only at a local level, but at a provincial level, at a national level. Can you imagine having premiers in and out of the door every hour? They're shaking their heads. They're saying, no. The system, of course, is different, but we must prepare for what could well be. And that's why we're having this conversation today. It's about, as these things happen, it's not just about the politicians or the people who have power and influence. It is also about you and I. Where are our voices as members of the community? What do we have to say? What is our stake in this democracy? What is our stake as civil society organizations in this democracy? Because the sooner we realize that there will be no invites to the table, you either come and approach the table and create a seat for yourself, or you are comfortable with not being part of the conversation. We are the ones that have to exercise that agency and demand to be heard and demand to have a voice. And that's why it's important for me to be part of this conversation hosted by the Nelson Mandela University. A big thank you to the Faculty of Humanities for hosting us today. Let's give them a round of applause. A very big thank you as well to the Raymond Mhlaba Center for Governance and Leadership in collaboration with the Center for Security, Peace and Conflict Resolution for presenting this community dialogue. Our theme today is elevating community and civil society voices into coalition government dialogue. To kick us off, I'm going to invite Ms. Sharon Masiza to give us the official welcome before we move on to the rest of our program. Please let's give her a round of applause as she comes to the stage.
Thank you very much, Kathy, for leading us into what we're about today. I think before I even start, colleagues, I think as the Missionville campus team, we are excited today. We are excited by the decision that was made by the Faculty of Humanities to host the event at our Missionville campus. So we are very pleased. I am Sharon Masiza. I'm the Senior Director of the Missionville campus and 2nd Avenue and Bed Street campus. Program Director, Ms. Kathy Mhlaba. We're very happy to have you here today. It's so lovely to see you at a close glance. Honorable Deputy Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Mr. Park Stau. He is attending the event virtually, colleagues. He is online. The Executive Dean of Humanities, for Professor Pamela Maseko, she's also attending virtually, but today she is represented physically by Professor Nomalanga Mkhize. The faculty management that is also represented by Professor Nomalanga Mkhize, who's the director of the School of Governmental and Social Sciences, the head of Department of History and Politics, and also is an acting director of the Center for Security, Peace and Conflict Resolution, Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast, the leaders of different formations and civil society. Also want to make a special mention of the representatives of SALGA, Sangoko, and Ephesus Copland that are joining us today, the special guests that we have amongst us, the academic community, our staff of Nelson Mandela University, the members of the media, community leaders, and members and the student population at large. On behalf of the Vice Chancellor, Professor Sibongile Mutwa, I would like to welcome all of you to Nelson Mandela University, Missionville campus. The Vice Chancellor would have been here in person to welcome you, but unfortunately, she's attending a university management consultation. So I send warm greetings from her Deputy Vice Chancellors, and all members of the management community of the university. By way of background, Nelson Mandela University adopted Vision 2030 in 2018. At the heart of Vision 20, our vision is to be in service to society. which basically means we are a university dedicated to being a beacon of service to society. As a university, we embark on a collective journey, recognizing that education's true purpose lies in its transformative impact on communities. Our commitment extends beyond academic excellence to betterment of society. As we cultivate minds, we pledge to nurture compassionate leaders, innovative thinkers, and socially responsible citizens. The university stands as a dynamic hub where knowledge converges with societal needs. So today's discussion on strengthening coalition formations in South Africa, working together with civil society and other strategic partners, is a true example of what we seek to achieve in our university. The outlook of the university informs the vision and strategic plan of the Faculty of Humanities. Both the Center for Raymond Mhlaba for Governance and Center for Security, Peace and Conflict Resolution are hosting today's event on power sharing in South Africa. The aim of this discussion is to close the gap that exists regarding the issue in question by bringing to the table all affected parties. At a glance, we have witnessed a number of failed coalition formations at local government. The instability of coalitions, which is often associated with the slow pace of service delivery and by implication worsened social ills such as unemployment, inequality, and poverty, among other things. The discussion on coalition is in line with the research agenda of Nelson Mandela University and the faculty. For instance, one of the research themes of the university is social justice and democracy. In 2024, South Africa will be having the much-awaited 7th general election. For the first time in our democracy, independent candidates will be allowed to participate in the general elections. Of course, this practice was only prevalent at local government level. The relationship between electoral systems and coalition formations is extremely important, largely because historically, coalition arrangements have always been linked to proportional representation electoral system. Coalition politics has developed in many European countries, but not as frequently in the English-speaking world. Specifically, power sharing has been associated with countries such as Netherlands, Switzerland, France, Greece, Bulgaria, Germany, Norway, Scandinavian countries, and Belgium. This is despite the fact that there have been cases of coalitions in post-colonial states. I hope that these are some of the discussions we will be having as participants and contribute to the ongoing debate regarding power sharing in South Africa. I trust that these conversations becomes a reminder once again about the purpose of a university in society, which is to generate and transmit knowledge which should ultimately lead to the transformation of society. And we are happy as a university that we are driving these conversations. So once again, welcome. I wish you well in the deliberations. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you so much for that, Ms. Masiza. On that note, I'm going to invite Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast to come and give us just a short account of why we are here today, and that, of course, will be followed very soon by the Deputy Minister of COCTA, who will be delivering his keynote address virtually. Professor Breakfast, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kathy, for that wonderful introduction. Earlier on, I was cracking a joke with Professor Mkhize that, you know, this place takes me down memory lane because I did my undergraduate studies here. and I was also a student leader. But I'm blown away by the setup and everything. You know, the place has changed for the better. But anyway, from my standpoint, I think the picture that is emerging is that one-party dominance is a thing of the past. And it looks as if next year we might not have an outright winner. Now, it's quite palpable that a number of coalition formations are falling apart. And as the previous speaker has indicated, that has impacted on service delivery. So the purpose of today's discussion is to bridge the gap between the provisions of conflict management and power sharing. Because if you look at the scholarship that is available, none of the academics, I'm sorry to say this, but none of the academics in the country have addressed the issue of coalition formations within the context of conflict management. I, for one, have never come across any publication of that sort. So I hope that when you are engaging and teasing out all these complexities, you will try your level best to bridge that gap. And as the Center for Security, Peace and Conflict Resolution, we would like to contribute as well to this ongoing debate. I think the challenge that we have as a country is that coalition formations are a new phenomenon, because if you look at the historical development of coalition formations, they rose to prominence, in my view, in the early 1900s. I think the first one that we saw was in 1924. The second one was in 1933. And then after that, from 1948 until the early 90s, the National Party was hegemonic until the ANC rose to power. The only time when the ruling party was dealt with a blow, I think, was in 2016, when it lost, major urban centers, and that was worsened by the democratic outcomes of 2021. And it looks as if the picture is bleak. So we really need to grapple with these complex questions as to what kind of power sharing do we need in the country to make a change for the better. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Professor Breakfast, and for really reminding us of the fact that ultimately there are no simple answers to how to deal with coalitions. It is very much a matter of complexity, but that we shouldn't be afraid of what that complexity means. We need to unpack it to its full extent if we at least to truly get to a point where we foster good cooperation, good collaboration, and working together amongst all of the stakeholders. It can't just be agreements that suit political parties. It has to be agreements that suit everybody in society. On that note, I'm going to welcome, not quite onto the stage, but he's joining us virtually, the Deputy Minister for Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Minister Pax Tau. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kathy, our program director. Excuse me. I hope that I'm both audible and visible. Program director, the DVC for People and Operations, Mr. Lutando Jack, acting director of the Center of Conflict for Security, Professor Ntsikelelo Breakfast, fellow discussants from Salga, Sangoko, and FC Scotland, public commentator Dr. Mtimka, representatives of the Raymond Mhlaba Center, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to join you today to discuss the seminal theme of elevating community and civil society voices into coalition dialogue. This discussion takes place at a pivotal juncture in the evolution and consolidation of South Africa's democracy. As we work collectively towards 2024, the task remains before us to build a transformative and developmental society that addresses the polycrises of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. The sphere of local government is a critical component in dealing decisively with these polycrises. In particular, as government, we urgently need the voices emanating from civil society and the private sector to build and realize outcomes that make a material difference in the lives and livelihoods of our citizens and communities. As the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, we are clear on the significance of engagements like the one we are having with the Nelson Mandela University in working together towards intentional action and collaboration, providing platforms for voices emanating from diverse communities and responding decisively to empower municipalities dealing with unprecedented levels of political instability and governance failures. Ladies and gentlemen, given the current state of local government, where there is a sizable number of dysfunctional municipalities, elevating civil society voices into coalition dialogue is important in achieving people-centered and people-driven participatory democracy. There is no doubt that service delivery pressure points are affected by the nature of coalition governments taking root in both provincial and local government levels. As has become evident, there is existential need for political, policy, and legislative proposals for the better and improved management of coalition governments. Some of the proposals being canvassed and discussed include the following principles and working together to advance: one, political stability, especially if there are ideological differences among coalition partners. Two, policy formulation, and that requires negotiation and compromise to reach inclusivity and diversity whilst mindful of the risk of setting a watered-down policies that satisfy the coalition partners but do not address the transformation development imperatives. And thirdly, challenges in decision-making in coalition government can be more complex and time-consuming, excuse me, and therefore impact the speed at which policies are implemented or decisions are made. And four, electoral dynamics and voter participation can be impacted upon by the success or failure of coalition governments. The experiences thus far certainly leaves much to be desired in terms of the perception of coalition governments. Ladies and gentlemen, what is the relevance of this context and principal positions? And why should we endeavor to balance between seeking to reach diversity in government levels whilst also respecting electoral outcomes? I'm sure you'll agree with me on the need, excuse me, I'm sure you'll agree with me on the need and necessity of respecting and avoiding to undermine democratic processes. Agreeing on thresholds as a foundational pillar of democracy is important. In simple terms, there is a threshold which says that to qualify to be in parliament, you require a minimum number of voters. Of course, you have a maximum number of seats, so you require a minimum number of votes. Not every party that participates in the elections gets into parliament, even as they receive numbers below the threshold. Therefore, coalition governments should indeed reflect the will of the people and not be representative of elite deal-making among parties. There are critical questions that we need to engage in the discourse around coalitions and our experiences so far as a country. Is it necessarily representative of the democratic outcome to be in a situation where, as a result of power broking and decisions amongst political office bearers, those who receive a voter threshold below 1% constitutes the bulk of the leadership of the municipality and government? Or should there be a minimum threshold to participate? Is there a risk that there is a disproportionate representation of parties with much lower electoral outcomes below 1%, constituting the bulk of the decision-making control as a result of their voting power in terms of tilting a decision and or establishment of coalition governments in one direction or the other? Or should we set a set of principles that underpin coalition governance on the principles of respecting democratic outcomes and the voices of the people? Statistics inform us that the amount of hung councils increased from 24 in the year 2000 to 21 after the conclusion, or rather to 81 after the conclusion of the 2021 local government elections. The high number of hung councils has highlighted the need for a framework to guide the formation and management of coalition councils. This existential need for the sustainability of our democratic dispensation arises from the fact that coalition governments have been characterized so far by the instability that has had severe impact as it compromises the municipality's ability to adopt policies and bylaws, make senior management appointments, or even adopt a budget. Coalition instability ultimately compromises the municipal administration's ability to deliver services to local communities. And coalitions put a strain on the planning and administration because it is difficult to predict, whether items will be passed in a council. Ladies and gentlemen, as COGTA, working in collaboration with provinces, National Treasury, SALGA, and other partners, we have since initiated several substantial legislative and policy proposals to address municipal challenges raised above. For one, the Municipal Systems Act review has reintroduced amendments to enhance municipal systems. The intended aim here is to strengthen the regulatory framework for improved municipal functioning. The Municipal Structures Act, or as it has been referred to as the Coalition Bill in relation to local government, has introduced or introduces a number of proposals that aim to attain the following measures. In instances where there isn't an outright majority for a party, converting to a mayoral collective executive and therefore transforming municipalities into a collective system of leadership that is proportionally represented by the parties that receive the highest numbers in council. There needs to be a tenure for office bearers, which ensures that there is a minimum 2 years for political office bearers to serve before there can be a passing of votes of no confidence. There should be a removal criteria which specify the grounds for removal and enhancing stability in municipalities. And binding coalition agreements are necessary to make provision for binding agreements in coalition scenarios. Ladies and gentlemen, the Constitution envisioned the progressive introduction of diverse representative voices in legislative structures against the backdrop of a country that had deep fissures and deep-seated divisions. But also, it envisioned this progressive change against the backdrop of a country that had a dominant voice representing the protagonists before 1994. And so as a constitutional imperative, it is essential for us to create a dispensation that accommodated these different voices. Since the introduction of the White Paper on Local Government and the Democratic Local Government in 2000, we're observing instability in local government, which is attributed to a variety of reasons. Amongst others, These include a deficit in required capacity, financial instability, and recently loosely arranged coalition governments. As COCTA, given the lessons we have learned through coalitions at a municipal level, we saw it prudent to consult through the national dialogue on coalitions as initiated by the Deputy President. In the main, the intention of the national dialogue was to agree on a set of principles that will make coalitions work in the interest of the greater good and in a change-orientated manner. Excuse me. The principles enshrined in the framework for coalitions bears mention in working towards one, putting the people first by making them the tenants of our value system in the formation of governments and working collaboratively to improve the lives of our people. Secondly, commitment to building a growing and inclusive economy that accommodates the vast majority into the mainstream economy. Excuse me. Three, a commitment to building a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, and prosperous society. And four, a commitment to good governance with no tolerance for corruption. And five, ensuring the party that has the largest electoral votes is allowed to lead the coalition and that executive positions are allocated proportionally according to the votes obtained by coalition partners. Ladies and gentlemen, why is this session today at the NMU significant in advancing partnerships and realizing the elevation of community and civil society voices into these coalition dialogues? The voices from citizens and communities reflected in the fellow discussants participating in this session today at the NMU can never be underestimated. We need to begin to rejuvenate a system or rather to reevaluate the system in place for our community and civic organization participation. We have the IDP process, which we need to enhance to be more responsive and more agile in order to meet the needs of communities and that the policies are reflective of the demands and needs of the communities. We should enhance the petitions process to ensure greater participation by communities and having representation of the issues that affect them most in their communities. We should enhance the work of our ward committees and the inclusion of community issues as a platform for engagement in ward committees. Elevation of community and civil society voices into coalition dialogue is sensible when it seeks to support and stabilize hung councils and local government coalitions through these measures and interventions. One, a citizens' charter that focuses on measurable targets for service delivery and development in communities. Such a program must be made public and be subjected to discussion in community meetings. Shared values based and premised on accountability, ethics and integrity, community participation, good governance, and the respect for the rule of law. Legislation support is required to ensure public administration is insulated from coalition deal-making and bargaining. And also accountability and transparency are non-negotiable to citizens and communities by, for example, providing platforms for giving quarterly reports, plus service delivery progress and milestone reports. Ladies and gentlemen, as COCTA, we are certainly encouraged by the initiative from the NMU for us to discuss and discourse on elevating community and civil society voices into coalition dialogue. We underline this since citizens and communities are not passive entities waiting for solutions to be handed down from above. They are dynamic and carriers of a wealth of knowledge that is often overlooked. We acknowledge and celebrate these invaluable resources in our pursuit of sustainable and equitable solutions. This is not merely an exercise in inclusivity, but it is a fundamental reimagining of how we define participation in the democratic process. We acknowledge that the trust between communities and decision makers is not a given. It must be earned by fostering an environment where those in power are answerable to the communities they serve. We cultivate a sense of responsibility that extends beyond the confines of formal governance structures. It is through this commitment to openness that we can bridge the gap between rhetoric and reality. In conclusion, the elevation of community and civil society voices into coalition dialogue is not just a goal to be achieved. It is a journey to be embraced. It is a commitment to fostering a future where the cacophony of diverse voices harmonizes into a symphony of shared aspirations. Thank you for your commitment to this shared vision. Together, let us sow the seeds of change, nurture the voices of the unheard, and collectively weave the tapestry of inclusivity, justice, and progress that will stand the test of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Deputy Minister Tau. And we do apologize just for some of the technical issues that have been experienced throughout that presentation. We're going to get into the discussion of the day, and this is where the meat is. The minister's address, I think, has set a foundation, at least in terms of the thinking of the department right now, of what are the big talking issues that we need to be focusing on. And what I don't want to do is have a conversation that at the end of the day feels like we're talking about things that are out there happening to other people, right? Because this is a conversation that is a personal. Whatever outcomes we envision, whatever realities we want to see for ourselves is what we must be able to voice in the session. Coalitions are not happening out there. They're happening to us. They affect us on a day-to-day basis. So when the minister talks about the fact that you have parties that have the majority of support, but don't have representation in governance, we must ask ourselves, what does that mean? And is it a situation that we necessarily are happy with or not happy with? Is there an entitlement that a party must get because they have the majority of votes, even if that does leave them beneath the threshold they need to take outright power? These are important conversations. So on that note, just to at least open up the discussion for us, I'm going to invite onto the stage, and of course you can take a seat right here so that we can get into our second part of the program. From Salga, I'm going to invite Sonwabo Qaeqe, Sonwabo, if you can please come to the front and just take a seat here. From Sangoko, Mongameli Peter. And from Ephesus Core Plan, Zindle Ngamlana. If you can all please come to the front and we can begin our conversation. Let's give them a round of applause, please. All right, so first I'm just going to ask that our discussants please just share their reflections on our topic today before we get into the nitty-gritties. Your reflections on not only the topic, but I think also what the Minister Pax Dau has said. Mr. Sonwabo, I'll begin with you.
Does this work? No, thanks very much, Program Director. And good afternoon to the university management, the academics, the participants in the seminar, fellow panelists. I think it would be an over-elaboration if one were to attempt to introduce anything new in the reflections from your introductory remarks. At least by the time you were halfway through, I was already here. The rather reluctant engagement with the topic by Professor Breakfast, knowing him. Regard to my former president, Deputy Minister Pax Dau, I had an honor of working with him and much appreciation for the invitation from the university, particularly the center. I had an opportunity to work very closely with Ray, and so contributing in a conversation in this space is really an honor for me. I think we firstly, let's appreciate the interest on coalition by all of you. You would assume, or you would be forgiven if you were to argue that this thing is new. Suddenly, because it's too close to what you have always considered to be the most important spheres of government, you're beginning to engage in the conversation on coalitions. I don't want to get into the space of forecasting what will be the outcome of the elections, but it does appear that the anxiety at the moment is caused by what people seem to suggest is the likely outcome of the forthcoming elections. I want to throw in a few things. I took some notes. I did ask the organizers, should I prepare something? They said, no, you just sit there and take notes and respond to speakers. And then later on, I learned that my former president is going to anchor the discussions. That became a bit tricky. So I'm not going to engage on the aspects that he has already covered. Particularly the outcomes of the dialogue that some of my panelists here participated in, fellow panelists here. But I want to throw in a few things, and I really am happy that the university is joining us in getting media personalities in these conversations, because quite a lot of things that are about these spheres of government, journalists do not know, and you get it from the questions that they're asking. So the question I would like to pose is: are we in this conversation particularly elevating the importance of the voice of civil society, because we may have failed to appreciate the fundamental conception of local government? Right. So, when local government was conceptualized, quite a number of things were by definition factored as fundamental elements of a municipality. So the only sphere of government in our South African laws that is defined in law is a municipality. And of course, we're on record as SALGA having argued that there is a third component that is absent in local government. So the three components in defining a municipality in terms of the Systems Act is council, administration, and community. And sort of linked to that is the electoral model that we adopted for local government, right? So if we were to discuss coalition and the fundamental importance of this, the voice of civil society without talking to these fundamentals, we're going to miss a very fundamental point. And so we went to sleep. Nondando will tell you, I argue. We went to sleep. We allowed political parties to amend legislation. So the original conception of local government is that almost 50% is made up of directly elected representatives, and the other 50% is proportional representatives. So the original conception of local government was that local government is going to be fundamentally about the value of both the vote and the voice. So only when there was an issue in a municipality in the Northern Cape did we learn that actually there was a slight amendment in legislation which became very important, that actually empowered a political party to campaign for a direct committee representative, to the extent that the political party is empowered, if it so wishes, to remove that word council. Were we asleep? That's the question. What happened? Where were we? Where were we? Because had we not allowed that, the value of the voice of civil society and communities would remain very important. So where were we? Madlamin. The second thing, which is a direct consequence of us being asleep, is how what committees were reduced to be committees of a councillor, when in fact by design they were meant to be a structure that holds accountable the public representatives, but at the same time a structure through which the community engages and mandates a ward councillor in council. What happened? So we undertook an analysis of an ideal model of a ward committee. So if you go back to the Ready to Govern document of the African National Congress, which is the oldest reference point insofar as our model of ward committees, you will see that there is an aspiration that these committees are going to be so powerful that they will be able to convene even before a council meeting to directly mandate a ward council before the council goes to a meeting, right? And they would even be given a mandate to sort out the basic things like potholes and all that, including allocation of some budget. So if you go back to that document, you'll pick that up. How did we lose these structures? Our laws actually make or compel municipalities to make committee meetings and council meetings open. Have we subordinated our voice to voices that seem to carry a municipality's mandate from a caucus instead of council meeting? What happened? Where have we been? So I really think, and my argument is that we're going to miss the point if we don't take a step back and look at some of these fundamental questions before we look at what happens and how do representatives in council behave. Right? So there is a whole host of other things. So we've allowed professionals to make audit committees of municipalities an arena of professional expression, when in fact by design an audit committee of a municipality was meant to create an opportunity for citizens of a municipality to audit books of a municipality. Now you are able to get somebody from Northern Cape or from Mpumalanga being a chairperson of an audit committee in Nelson Mandela Bay. How did we allow our own disarticulation in terms of those committees? Because it has become a profession now. It pays to be in an audit committee. How did we allow that to happen? Right? So the whole arena of developments in the evolution of our current model of local government has actually created a problematic environment where party interest seems to overweigh the fundamental purpose of a municipality. All right, so you want me to talk about coalitions. The deputy minister is correct. We have always had coalitions since 2000. There has never been a time in local government in South Africa where there was no coalition. The only difference is that we suddenly had 81, and we actually could have even more if there's a by-election in some of the municipalities as we speak, right? And so we now are realizing that because we have allowed a situation where we get to know a municipality from the context of our municipality, we failed to understand local government in its broader sense. So do you know there's a municipality type that we had for many years that is called plenary municipality? We've had that for many years. We've just amended legislation to convert those to a collective system. The irony is that in that plenary type municipality, you actually had one person who would be a mayor and a speaker. We did not have these controversies that we have. Very few ethical questions that we're dealing with. We had to consider to amend the legislation just to create a space where there's maturity of democracy. So how is it that we are now worried about the behavior of our public office bearers? And I think the Deputy Minister has addressed the principles that should frame our discussion. Maybe the second question, so were we asleep was the first question. The second question is, for me, more about maybe we think we can hold public representatives accountable without taking a keen interest on what of the citizens. Right? What of the citizens? So because even civil society are organized formations, but what of the citizens generally? So I want to argue, controversially so. So quality political members plus quality leaders from political parties equals quality public representatives and quality citizens. So when we discuss this question of coalition, because it's a behavioral issue, so it's a behavioral issue. I will give you an example, which I think is necessary.
Very briefly, please, before I
I'll
wrap
give you
you
an
up.
example, which I think is necessary for this discussion, particularly that we're in Nelson Mandela Bay. The matter is still in court. So when one coalition changed the other, and then that one was changed by the other, and that one was changed by the other, we argued. Again, the issue that is important about us knowing local government is that there are types in local government. So there's plenary, there's collective executive, and there's mayoral executive. Right? So our constitution allows us. So if you go to KZN, there's no executive mayoral. All of them are collective executive. So it lobbied everybody, and thanks to government, they agreed with our proposal that the only way you would save some of these municipalities is by making them collective executive. So our constitutional construct actually enables us and even provides a formula that when you are a collective executive, the allocation of seats in the mayoral committee will be in accordance with your the votes that you received. So in Nelson Mandela, which must be something of interest, and the matter is in court, so I'm not going to delve any further. So we had one coalition and another, and then we eventually succeeded in convincing everybody to convert this municipality into a collective executive. So the one that was in power opposed that and filed papers, and then it was removed, and now it seems to be supporting that we must amend the system to create a collective executive. So this is a behavioral issue. All right? So I will address some of the specifics, but the point that I think is important which takes me to that question, which is quality members of a political party or an NGO plus quality leaders equals quality public representatives. Is that perhaps we should accept that we have very little opportunity to tamper with the rigors of democracy. So we can't say people who are uneducated cannot be elected. But we can say people who are elected, at least people who must be given a political office as office bearers must meet a certain set of minimum competencies. And that is the argument that we took to all political parties as SALGA after these elections. We even went to an extent of saying Nelson Mandela equals to this amount in terms of the economic value of the metro. Please do not elect a mayor who does not have an appropriate qualification. Did political parties listen? Maybe you should look at the various mayors in the various metros. So I'm not going to delve into the issues that the deputy ministers addressed, but I think there is a conversation that we need to have other than to look at the coalitions themselves. Because we are more worried about who is going to be a mayor. And my argument is that that's not the issue. Who decides who becomes a public representative? And what is the responsibility of that decision maker? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. From Ephesus Core Plan, Zinhle Gamlana, I'll give you an opportunity also just to share your reflections, but I'm going to ask that you please do better than the first speaker on the issue of time. Thank you.
I'm really going to try. Thank you, Kathy, and good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I think Ms. Masiza had established the protocol for us, so just allow me to observe it. I come from that thing that's civil society. I think about these questions, write about these questions, engage on these questions, and often engage SOBs and our other colleagues in SALGA and other spaces where we don't often agree on a whole lot of things. So just as a point of departure, SOBs raises very interesting questions. And I think a very simple response to the questions that he raises, and I'll argue that those with numbers created for us the legal framework and the practice in local government that we're now reflective of. And we also need to be quite mindful when we're critical of civil society and civil society role, that there was a time, particularly in the first 10 years of our democracy, when civil society was bled of skill and capacity to form the new democratic space. And so I think we need to just be alive and critical, and that was the disjuncture or the time in our democracy when a number of these laws were concretized, were formed, were passed. And so we are where we are now because we, I guess, just stepped out of it for a little bit, and we trusted that the people and the numbers that we had in the room had our best interests at heart. And I think that for me engages the minister's quota question, because there's something there in numbers. And there's something in the misplaced trust that those with the numbers have our best interests at heart. And I think we've learned that that's not always true, it doesn't always hold. And I think also there is something to engage in the understanding also of the intent and the ethos behind our proportional representative system. I would think of a small, rural, largely peri-urban municipality, perhaps maybe that's got 3 parties in council, and most probably has 60 or 100 seats, not a big municipality at all, but one that's doing fairly well and raises its own revenue and raises its own budget, and must go in a coalition, right? And so we have had an election, there's no outright winner, we must form a coalition. And if we're going by quotas and numbers, it means that in those 3 parties, you're likely going to have the largest 2 forming a coalition. And the reality is that that compromises accountability in council from the get-go, right? There's voices that will not be heard in the room. And so there's dynamics to this thing. And it really calls on all of us to dig a little deep in the conversations that we're having. Often when we have this conversation, there's an assumption on all of us that South Africa is a metro across board. And that the reality is the same from the Western Cape, Joburg, and Jogabi. And that when we craft a model, it must work in Gauteng in the same way that it will work in Bizana. And the reality is that we gotta think about differentiation. We gotta be realistic in the kinds of framework that we develop and design that must work for specific and certain contexts. To a large degree, in this conversation, both from Kokta government, Salga, and in many spaces where we're having this conversation, that element of differentiation doesn't come through. Then the minister ended, the DM ended by just throwing 3 key takeaways for civil society. So if you really want to participate in governance, particularly in a coalition-led municipality, says there needs to be a citizen charter. I mean, isn't that the IDP? Don't we already have a contract? Isn't that supposed to be a contract, a binding contract? Do we need another? And then he says, well, there needs to be values and ethical leadership. We don't even have an ethics code. We don't have an implementable ethics code as a country. And we certainly don't have any mechanism, not in council, not in parliament, that's ethics oriented. And so we're talking about values and ethics as a responsibility of civil society and the public. And then he talks about accountability and transparency and says there's gotta be quarterly reporting. That's already in the law. All of the monthly reports, the bi-monthly reports, the quarterly reports should already be in the public domain in accessible language. Accessible language is often not English. Accessible language is infographics. It is diagrams, it's pie charts, it's simplified information that empowers me to understand what is happening in my own space and empowers me to ask the right questions of those in power. And so these things already exist, and often when we're having these conversations, we change the language and we make it come through as if it is something completely new that we are asking for. Now just dealing and going back to coalitions very quickly, indulge me here for a minute. So coalitions are not new in democratic South Africa. The city of Cape Town has been led through a coalition. There are many coalitions, particularly in the Western Cape and some in Gauteng, that work very well. The coalition in KZN post-1994 worked beautifully, I'd argue. So coalitions are not a new thing in South Africa. They just became dysfunctional post-2016. And we gotta ask ourselves, what happened post-2016 that delivered for us dysfunctional coalitions? I'd say the first thing, and this is the biggest elephant in the room, is the socio-economic context. When the state is the economy, and when patronage networks is accessed through politics and through decision-making positions in the state, then we are going to have dysfunctional coalitions, we'll have dysfunctional institutions of government, will have dysfunctional almost everything, right? We are largely going into an era of increased chaos as a function of the socio-economic context. We also increasingly are morphing into a space where democracy is inaccessible to the poor and marginalized, where this thing that's called democracy makes sense for those that can access these documents and can read these things and ask the right questions. If you are poor and marginalized, that thing doesn't work for you. If you don't have access to data, you're never going to see these things, right? And so democracy itself and the quality of democracy is increasingly weakening. And so we have a whole host of citizens who are increasingly feeling voiceless and are getting very pissed off. And so we got a real threat brewing. And so, but then again, we are in a context where we are seeing increased political instability. By law and design, we had kicked out citizens out of that thing called municipal council. They have very little power in oversight, very little power in a whole lot of things, so they're not there. Political parties have a big hand in decision making and what goes on in council, whether this coalition comes or goes, vote of no confidence, who's the municipal manager and all of that. We're not there. And then that leads us to big governance failures, right? So when you have political instability and you have governance failure, that leads to poor service delivery ultimately. But you can't fix the instability using the same tools that you're fixing the governance failures with. And often when we talk about coalitions and we're talking about this framework for coalitions, we're talking about it as a catch-all tool, that when we get the framework right, it's going to fix our politics and the culture in politics and all of the nonsense that's going on in politics, right? Bearing in mind that we are a party state. And when you've written your laws that a political party must determine who is in senior position in civil service, you've made yourself a party state. And when there's problems in the party, there will undoubtedly be problems in the state. And so, and coalitions aren't gonna fix all of it for us. And so whenever we're engaging in these conversations, yes, we must fix coalitions, we gotta get the framework right. And lo and behold, we do not want to have a coalition at national level outside of some kind of a framework. So we gotta move at it with speed. But the second thing is the governance stuff. We can't leave that, and coalitions aren't gonna fix the governance stuff for us. So we need to figure out how to bring citizens back into the oversight architecture of local government. So we need to overhaul the oversight architecture itself.
All right.
Whether you have the big numbers outside of a reformed oversight architecture is disaster. Is letting an elephant come through your front door and then you have no defense mechanism against it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for that, Sinhle. Mongameli Peter?
Thank you very much, Katie, and let me join Nontando to observe the protocol that have been predetermined by the director for the institution. I will frame my reflection and reply in two levels. One being to problematize the coalition from a perspective of civil society. And perhaps sounds like Lenin and speak to what is to be done. But naturally, I won't go to the what is to be done because as a participant, I would want to engage on that one when we engage with the plenary. Let me then go to problematizing the coalition from our perspective. But in doing so, let me preface by underscoring probably three areas. One of which the subject is kind of presented as some kind of an afterthought ongama, as if it's not a matter of necessity, talking the posture of participatory democracy. it's not a favor that civil society. Umhlekazi weSalga uyichaze kakuhle le milenze mithathu. Hence, I would want to underscore that part first. The second thought that I would want to, linking that critique with the one high-level report of Mutlante that speaks to the fact, again, of the lack of really promoting and activating participatory democracy. The third area that I would want to underscore relates to the subject itself has been a dominant of the defaulters themselves, which is the political parties. Which political parties will naturally be subjective in the matter. They will never be objective. Talking now coalition. And of course, be hard on us as civil society to say, we have for so long abdicated our civil duty, our civil responsibility to political society. And I think the Salga colleague did speak to that too. Then problematizing the subject matter. Kathy, in your welcoming of us, you indicated that the subject of coalition is almost a bread and butter to us. Just to emphasize, apart being a secretary for South African NGO Coalition, in Nelson Mandela Metro, I'm the chairperson of the Nelson Mandela Civil Society Coalition, made of this university, made of business chamber, made of church, made of labor, and everybody else. You can Google, you'll get what we've been saying about the ills of local government in this city. So it's quite a close to heart issue, as it were. We're not engaging on the discussion so as to entice and, doing it for purposes of as if it's a thesis exercise. Not at all. The problem from our perspective of these coalitions as they stand now is that they do not affirm the will of the people, but rather they affirm the will of the party, if not party leaders. That's the problem number one with coalitions. Naturally, the fact that they are not legislated is a problem. And of course, the reputational dent and credibility of these coalitions. Because there is no good story to tell about these coalitions, either way. Naturally, they thin on the objective that sought to address that which is about the people. You can go to this agreement. The dominance there is around which party will get which service delivery line department in terms of MMCs and all of that nonsense. And of course, there is this lack of the effective monitoring and evaluation, including dispute resolution mechanism. Because you can't be a referee and a player. You enter into an agreement, upindus police the same parties. It can't be. No wonder they fail day after. So that's the problem with this coalition. The fact that it's an arrangement also is a problem. It's an arrangement. The immaturity of the party representatives. The current crop of councillors is a mess. I wouldn't want to go to the details in relation to system, electoral systems and all of that. most of all, the parties in majority are the enablers of this anarchy. The case on point is what we have in the city. That's why I'm saying this is a close to heart issue. The parties in majority, Democratic Alliance and the ANC, small parties can never have mayors and MMCs for as long as they do not get support from the two. So the two are enabling the anarchy. Is a problem. Those are the problems that you have in the current coalitions. I've indicated that I won't get into what needs to be done. I'll come to that. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much to our discussions, and I think so many different issues that have come up. In a moment, I am going to be opening it up to you as our delegates to also participate in this conversation and have your say. The one thing that, you know, if we look at our theme for today, elevating community and civil society voices into coalition government. That theme in and of itself suggests that these voices are excluded from the space, that these voices are not given a platform, that they're not heard enough. And this conversation, at least as far as I understand it, is to say, number one, why is that the case? Number two, how do we begin to change that? And I'm not 100% sure that while we have been deliberating on some of the issues that make coalition governments complex, that we have actually given adequate attention to the question that we have been asked. Because we have spoken about why we believe communities and civil society are excluded, but we have not dealt with then how do we begin to change that. And yes, some of the reasons for it may have been by design, as you have outlined when Mr. Sonwabo, when speaking about the legislative framework. Some of it may have been because civil society has taken a step back. But do those explanations give adequate and understanding of why we have the situation that we do today? Because regardless of what the legislation says, there should still be room for members of a community to come to a municipality and feel that their issues can be heard and can be attended to. But that is not the case that we sit with today. What happens when ordinary members of society go to municipalities, they're given forms. They're told, come back tomorrow. And that is the issue that we need to be confronting. Because regardless of what the legislation says, or even how it ended up there, it doesn't change the experience of the ordinary man. Which is why now we have to sit and discuss how we elevate voices that very much have a stake in the space. So I want us to deal with that issue. And then I'm going to give our audience members an opportunity to also weigh in and ask their own questions. Because in as much as, you know, part of it has been centered around local government, and I think the aim for today is also to look at, well, what needs to change so that should we experience this at a national government, things can be different. But what has failed in the architecture of our governance more broadly, that communities, that civil society voices are excluded.
You are getting closer to the second question I was raising. Because you see here, we you are asking a very pertinent question. That when we created directly elected representatives, such a question ought to have been asked whilst that direct representative sits there alone by the constituency. So we have created a system now where, because of lack of practical measures to enable that, you ask that question when they sit there together as the council and procedure kicks in. I said, and I just whispered to Nondando that there's a paper I would like to go back and write, because I left it halfway through after these elections, that I wish everybody realizes that the increase in the number of coalition municipalities means an end to the power of a party caucus. All right? But it does appear, because we're dealing with a very foreign, maybe not foreign, but new notion, Professor Breakfast, which some scholars are saying is a notion of sitting together, standing apart. So parties in council are able to meet, engage in close session because of the absence of the third component. And they're very happy to get outside there and seem to be standing apart whilst they sit together in the negotiations, whatever form the negotiations take. So maybe then the question is the burning question. If you were to look at the classical paper you're referring to, what is to be done, the burning question. And so one of the things that we may want to look at, in addition to the ongoing discussions, which is what the Deputy Minister was referring to, is what becomes the contribution of the third component in the negotiations. Because the point here is not how best can we avoid coalitions. Citizens are saying, go there and manage our affairs together. That's what they are saying. They're saying, we're not giving any you an outright majority. Go there and work together. So the fundamental question that you need then to deal with is, how do we activate the third component? Siyayibaleka ke lento, Prof. What are our common values as South Africans? Maybe that's a debate for another day. But one would assume, if we had agreed on a set of our common values as South Africans, at least we would all have a reference point that guides our behavior, whether you're in the church, at school, at work, or a public representative. And if we did have that, then members of Party A in their own party meeting would ask these questions you're asking before representatives of that party go into any council meeting.
All right.
So the quality of members in political parties plus quality leaders from those political parties will equal quality public representatives. They will not, when they get into council, legislature, if some changes happen, repurpose the state. So you can't consume the state because it's the only existing opportunity. Because citizens are there, they ask those questions at home in their political party and when they engage with you as the council.
All right.
The rest are procedural matters. The forms and the other things are procedural matters, which have a lot to do with how are we participating when a municipality is developing a policy, is developing a bylaw, does a municipality create an opportunity for us to participate when they're developing a bylaw? Those are questions that, in my opinion, hinge on these fundamental questions. Then coalitions will be a simple matter, honestly.
I think the only thing that I would want to add to what you're saying, you don't need to give a response, but it's just something to throw out there. When we talk about legislation that has been created and we say we have created the legislation, and in the same breath we look at the amount of civic education that we have in the country and how many people can, very realistically, how many people understand how local government works. You were saying earlier that, you know, even with journalists who are supposed to be working with some of these issues on a day-to-day basis, there's only a very narrow understanding of how it works. So the system by design is exclusionary. So on the one hand, it also suggests that you can't blame people for not participating in a process that they fundamentally do not understand. And there has been very little initiative to ensure that people do in fact understand. But I think that that's a situation that again suits political parties. Because the less we understand, the less involved we are. And they get to run amok and do whatever it is that they want to do. And those are things that we also sort of, if we're to deal with things as they are, we have to be honest about talking about. To say, yes, it's all good and well to say people must get involved, but really, is the space conducive for them to get involved? And if it were, would we be seeing the number of protests that we see in this country on a day-to-day basis? Zintle?
So I agree fully with you, Kathy. I think, and that's my core argument, whenever we come into the room and we're having a conversation on coalitions. Having a conversation on, because coalitions by design are a political arrangement. They are an arrangement between political parties. They operate well in the realm of politics. So to have a conversation about coalitions and not have, at the same time, a conversation on system design is talking about one side of your body or one of your leg and not talking about the rest of your body when you need to be talking about the rest of your body. And so we need to look at local government at a much more holistic manner. I'll give you an example. Executive mayoral systems are elitist by nature. A ward councillor has very little power and influence in an executive mayoral system. They are just the dude by the door. They are voting fodder. They get told what to vote for, when to vote, basically. And so that's a system that's elitist, that's got bosses and others. And those person that you've elected, shame, however hard they might run around, they'll run until they drop. They have very little power to influence a whole lot of stuff. And so that's a system question. The petition system is in shambles. Submit a petition in province, in national, ask the people in Makana how many petitions they've submitted in the last 5 years and how many court cases they've won and what that has translated to. And so there's something in the system that has failed and has collapsed and has therefore made a majority of citizens quite adversarial in how they engage the state. And that's not something that we're going to fix by having a coalition that's got people that we think are cute. Even if they like each other. It's not something that there's something in the design because the system itself has kicked the majority of South Africans who must go to a council meeting. I invite you to go to any council meeting. We did this work for 5 years and attended 680 council meetings in 6 provinces. Decisions are made in caucus. When they come in there, a matter is tabled and then noted, voted, passed, ayeleletu, and that nonsense. You have no bloody idea what they're talking about. You haven't seen the agenda. The what committee that you are with have not seen the agenda, and yet they were meant to see the agenda in the what committee meeting. That's just if you have an MPAC, they're frustrated to hell. If you have one that works, good luck to you. If you have what you call it, an audit committee, it's a technical exercise. And so all of these mechanisms that should help us ask the right questions that influence decisions to our benefit as the public, we kicked out. The door is locked. We can't come in. The only way that people feel like they're able to take power is when they go to the street. Because then that's when those in power listen. Because in the design of the system, they've been left out. In the practice that's established, they've been left out. And so, yes, we must talk about coalitions, but there's other big questions to talk about as well, and that's my argument. And so, what do? I agree that so where coalitions work in South Africa, the post-1994 coalitions, where they work and work well, is when coalitions are formed by parties that seem to coalesce around ideology. That's what we are finding. If there's some semblance of coalescing around ideology, those ones, they seem to work well. There's less contestation and political infighting. They're happy to let the others make the decision, whatever needs to happen. Where there is big difference on ideology, but we've agreed to come together, you need to look very closely there, because our coming together is unholy, very unholy. We don't like each other, we don't agree on the fundamental stuff, but we agree so long as you give me engineering. And so there is that semblance of, can we talk about how we form these coalitions? Because the big numbers, the quota, the majority votes, therefore, let's form a coalition, let's have some kind of a threshold. That conversation puts a lot of assumption, and the kinds of assumptions that we've already seen don't work. So we can't, I mean, I would argue that let's revisit that conversation. Let's just talk about it a little bit more, because numbers have not up to far translated to all things in our public good. So that would be the first one. So let's rethink what are the core principles that we would want to put in some kind of a framework. And obviously this can't be law, but it's got to be like some kind of a framework legislation, because you can't regulate in law something that's essentially a political party arrangement. And so we need some kind of a framework of sorts. And then the second one is those agreements made by those people that have agreed that they're gonna work together. Let's make those public. And perhaps maybe the framework must say those must be binding. And then we can scrutinize those agreements, and we can make a noise about them if they're not speaking to service delivery, or if they're not aligned with what we think should be the vision for our municipality, our city in a 5-year period. And I'd argue that finally, there has to be some kind of a platform or platforms for engagement and engaging with the members of the coalition, because often in coalition-led municipalities, a mayor gets sent to communities, whereas in a coalition, they're limited in how decisions are made. And so there has to be a mechanism of holding the whole damn coalition somehow to account and to ask the difficult questions of the whole lot of them. Those would be just some of my top of my head ideas. Thanks.
Thank you.
Where you landed, I would have, sponsored among the issues exactly that. That at issue really is the agreements that gets to be entered into have to be subjected to public scrutiny.
Yeah.
Not only because we want to see and appreciate them and that's it. Because an argument can come and say, anyway, all government documents are off public, or many, including your IDPs and annual reports and all of that. But there's a particular purpose for subjecting this one on public scrutiny. In the main, it has to be postured around that which is of that community, talking service delivery, whatever is that agreement. So if that is not there as a core value, as a core rationale of why a municipality would have been established, in terms of, what is this section, 152. So if those elements are not there in the agreement, it's as good as you can't have that agreement in the space of the community. Civil education and awareness, I think Usopp spoke to that which is the first for me to hear some of the available systems in law, that can be fostered in or mainstreamed in various instances, including the plenary something, which we generally as communities, we do not know that, and I think that should be the case. Talking now, making people aware so that on the basis of being aware, you're then able to participate and partake towards a redress, given the situation at the time. The deputation, I think, Trevor, are you still here? We had it for the first time in the country, where civil society speaks in council. That's here in PE. That should have been 2015, before Danny Jordan was brought into the seat. We were the first. I'm talking the coalition I'm leading, civil society I'm leading. And I doubt very much people are aware that you can apply to the Speaker's office and go and say whatever nonsense you want to say to the councillors. We did it here in the city. So talking now or responding to the elevation of civil society in the concrete, sense, I can only hope, Deputy Minister, if you're still with us and USOPs, the mooted framework on coalition does have an empowering elements that speaks to what I've just spoken into. Because in the absence of that, it's as good as this proposal we're making, they may not fly. Because you must institutionalize it and legislate it somewhat, so that, where they find meaning and enforcement. Because the issue is this element of abantwana bayadlala, as if we say crash, as it were. I can only hope, but as is, you need to have it structured in the manner that Nondando and now myself are saying in terms of that. Other than that, I'm fine. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much to our panelists. I'm now going to open the session up to you as members of not only this seminar, but also as members of communities, right? And perhaps the simplest way to have the conversation is to ask, well, what would make you feel that your voice is heard? What would make you feel that you are included in conversations around coalition governments? How different do you envision the experience being? And you can use some of the examples that you encounter today and say, well, actually, what we have today is X. If I could do Y, I believe that my voice then would be heard. My voice would be elevated. What is the difference that you as members of communities are looking for? I'll ask you to raise your hand. We'll have a microphone that is roving around the room. And if you can just maybe begin by your name and your surname. If you're representing an organization, you're more than welcome to tell us which organization you're representing, or just tell us the community that you're from, and we can build on the conversation from there. I'll take hands. All right, let's begin at the back and we will work our way to the front. I'm just going to ask that we please keep our contributions short. I've got my timer here. The most time that I'll be giving anyone is a maximum of 2 minutes. So the minute you start speaking, I am going to have my timer on. So please be mindful of that.
Thank you, Kathy. Good evening, good afternoon to everybody present. Few things. One, I think we are approaching this thing wrongly. Okay. As I said, I think we are approaching this thing wrongly, completely. First, South Africa is involved in a revolution. That the parties in government have decided to turn against it completely, including the party with political power, changes nothing. And if, therefore, South Africa is involved in a revolution, what is it that both parties in parliament should do? Unfortunately, we've got two sets of parties in parliament. Those that are happy with the status quo. Those parties that were part of our past. Parties that were in parliament long before this country was liberated politically. That's the first set we have. We also have the liberation movements that have also turned against our people, including my own organization, the African National Congress. And I'm saying, therefore, if you are suggesting that we should make these changes that the panel is talking about, I'm wondering how is that going to help us? In no way can we be helped by what has been suggested there. We need to change. The only thing, of course, that we should accept, that we need to change the whole system. However, a program has to be about liberating the people of this country and involving them in the decision making. We're involved in a party political system. You are not going to help South Africa until you do away with that. Thank you very much. My name is Mhlaba.
Thank you so much, sir. And just for clarity, before you take the microphone away from him, I wanted you to just explain. When you say that the country is involved in a revolution, but the parties are choosing to ignore that, what do you mean?
Beneficiation, for instance, in the mineral resources of our country. Not a single person benefits except people who are politically connected. The rest of South Africans are not benefiting. That's what South Africans were fighting for. We're a rich country, a very rich country. Nobody should go to bed without food. That's what is happening in South Africa. That's what I mean by revolution.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Let me go to this end of the room. Yes, sir.
Yes, good day, Kathy and the panel. My name is Bongani Mani. Hello, Tedinyani, Sis Kathy. I am a PR councillor in the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality. So that, but can I not say my party so that it does not sound as if I'm defensive?
Don't worry, we don't judge.
Thank you very much. 2 or 3 things, and I'm hoping that this conversation will be a beginning of the change that we would really want to see. One of the first things that I agree with, that I think Utada from Salga spoke about the issue of the quality leaders, quality members, translating into quality in terms of council and of governance. And I want to relate that to the point about how simple it is to wake up one day, open a political party, contest elections, find yourself in council in this country. One of the most simple things to do in this country is to wake up, open a party. One of the requirements, apart from money, which is about 2,000 rands for a municipality, is you just need to get 300, minimum, 300 people to sign and say, I know that Bongani has opened a party, I am a registered voter, I agree that he must vote. And that enables you to then go and represent. Take that point, attach it to the fact that continuously and across the metros, you've got one-seater parties that are supposed to be responsible for a constituency that they do not have. Now, at the essence of this for me is an issue of voter education. I don't agree with the point that says that it is our communities that actually produce what we currently have. Because when you walk into a voting station, you receive 2 ballots. One is for your ward, which is your ward councillor. The second one is for the PR. Any person who has voted before, and I'm waiting for someone who's going to say to me, for the ward I voted for this party, for the PR I voted for a different party. That rarely happens. That rarely happens. So take that point, attach it to the second aspect. The third element, Ms. Kathy, because the question was asked here as to what happened in 2016. And it's also attached to the question of voter education. That many of us, including the well-educated ones, did not know that formula that IEC uses to allocate seats. Because in the metro now, out of the 60 wards, the wards are 38 to the ANC, the rest to the DA. The rest of the parties that are governing do not have a single ward. So there's something that we really have got to educate our people about in relation to the importance of voting, but also when not voting, what does that mean? So those are my because I see you now moving your mic. I take it my 2 minutes is up. Okay, thanks.
All right, sir. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask that before we move on, where is the microphone right now? Please pass it to the lady behind you. Let me get some of the gender representation going in the room.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, my name is Councillor Nobathembu Gogo, and I also form part of the Council of Nelson Mandela Bay. So I think firstly, let's all understand and appreciate that a coalition government is a result of organized voices. So we all said, look, we're tired of these ones and these ones. Let's say we gather in this room and agree that we need to be represented. But in council, you're represented by a party. So umsindo, or the anger that unites us here against the party, will result in us creating another party in order to be represented there, which for me is probably the first step and how a voice is lost. We unite and gather under one particular frustration. Then we agree that I must go represent you. Then I lose my voice, firstly being one person, and secondly lose my voice or your voice when I understand how process works. And that's a problem we have with coalition at the moment, that if I am not mayor, I am not something in the exco, I throw tantrums, council must not sit, certain things must not happen, and those are the truths that we need to speak to our people about. The second thing, which I think is quite important, is the truth around the voice, or how the voice is lost. We start revolutions, but we don't finish them. So we gather here, but post here we do nothing, just as communities. So the issue around participation is important. In Nelson Mandela Metro, salala silipai, savuka siligqebeg, and no one or very few people knew how the name change happened because people did not participate. And why are our people not participating? Where is the hunger? Where is the drive? And we're not able to respond to that. We don't participate in KFC surveys, only if there's a competition, but we generally don't participate, be it a public meeting, be it at IDP, be it a social media platform. We're not interested. And that for me kills the voice, because the topic here is elevating community and civil society voices. And we must be able to understand where the voices are lost. My last point, which I think is very important, is what Usisi was saying about the architecture or the infrastructure or the system itself. The truth is, the system has become quite political. The civil societies and organizations that are supposed to be non-political have become political. So your objective voice that is supposed to be representing civil society and communities are no longer objective. Law is no longer objective. You go to a law firm to ask for a legal opinion as to why the sky is blue. They'll give you this understanding. You go to a law firm next door with the same facts, same merits, and you're given a different understanding. And then you're told then, go govern with whatever understanding. And that understanding that is used is the one that is determined by how many people have voted for or against. So the conversation we must really have. Another thing, Sis Kathy, is what you're doing, suppressing time. but I do think that we need to go back to the participation element, understand it, appreciate it, and participate fully. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Just one other thing that I would like to throw out there, and listening to some of the contributions again that have come in so far. While we talk about communities needing to be represented in these government agreements, etc., to what extent does that also acknowledge the fact that the majority of these communities we speak about are not represented in the numbers of those who have participated and voted these political parties into office in the first place? And how do we deal with that? Because our sister there began by saying that, you know, part of why coalitions are the way they are is because the people have chosen that they be that way through their vote. But we know that the majority of South Africans who are eligible to vote are not voting. They are not voting. The numbers at a national and a provincial level are better than they are at a local level. There's hardly more than 50% voter turnout when we have by-elections. Give me any municipality. If you have 80%, do we have municipalities that have 80% turnout in by-elections? They don't exist. They simply don't exist. So even when we talk about how the structure or the frame or the situation is the way that it is, in which part of our conversation do we acknowledge that the majority, perhaps even by not voting, is saying that this system is a system that we are not participating in? Have we done enough to understand why, even though there are potholes on the road, even though we don't have electricity, even though we complain about the schools where we take our children to, when we have the opportunity to vote, we still choose to say, andizi. All right, where's the microphone? Please give the microphone to the lady next to you with the braids. Okay, we'll have to see if we come back up there for a second round. And then I saw another hand on this side of the room. All right, you can bring it down here to the gentleman in the blue shirt. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Kathy. Thank you for the opportunity. I'll be short and brief. I'm from the civil society. I'm from an organization called I Protect Me. And you know what? Something, if you look at this agenda, inclusivity. There's a lack of inclusivity in the Eastern Cape. We need diversity, and we need to celebrate diversity. We shouldn't be afraid of it. if you look in the history of this Gqeberha, please, Kathy, praat Afrikaans ook. Want die is Afrikaanse mense in
verstaan
Gqeberha.
Afrikaans.
Nee, ek wil net vir jou sê, toe jy begin het, toe sê jy Xhosa. And I want you to go back to the history of Gqeberha, please. But don't want to talk about that today. You know what? We as civil society are doing the work of government at the moment. Because a lot of people are just fighting, and we are on the ground and looking after people with very, very little resources. Because while we had a report this year, alone during the period of July and September, about 10,000 rapes were reported. Only that period. And while we are sorting out everything in our councils and legislation and the framework, people are hungry, people are fighting, there's poverty, there's unemployment, and then we don't bring the rapists here. We don't invite them here. We don't invite the survivors here so that we can hear the voices of the people that are hungry, the voices of a woman that can't go back to her home because she's been excluded. And there's no place for a person that is suffering from substance. There's no place in Gqeberha. There are no places to take our children. There are no safe houses enough over this 16 days of activism to host children and women that are being abused because we are sorting out a framework. So who is doing the work, really? Because that is not even getting enough attention. So while we're having all these conversations, and we are in the business of getting solutions and not be part of the problem. And you know why people are tired? Because we have these dialogues every month, every week, it's a dialogue. You are invited. Where's the implementation? And who takes ownership of monitoring and evaluating when Cindy's saying she's going to do this? Is it happening? Because I'm getting paid, but my jacket is hanging on the seat and I'm nowhere there. And no one is checking if I'm doing my job because there's nothing in place for me. I can have different businesses, but I'm working for the municipality. And I'm getting paid every month, and civil society is running around in the communities getting a stipend of 2,300 rand, ma'am, for a month. And yet and then we submit our reports. And they write nice reports because civil society give them the reports and give them the stats every month. And there's no security for us in our areas. There's nothing. And you know what? Sometimes people don't even want to come to our areas because they say they need bodyguards, but we are doing the work in those areas. And we are supplying the stats. So I'm really asking you and the organizers of this event, let us see diversity there in the bench, please. I want to hear someone that speaks Afrikaans there that understand me, that understand my plight, that's not going to judge me and not going to say I'm uneducated, I don't want to study, I don't want to do this, and I don't want to do this, but you don't know my journey and you've never been in my shoes. So please, Eastern Cape has a problem in the rest of South Africa because we can't support one another because I'm going to outshine you. There's a bigger picture than me. There's a bigger picture in South Africa. We need to support someone that is better than me. And you can see this person is going to drive the vision of this country. It's not necessarily me, but my neighbor. How am I not possible to support my neighbor because I want to be elevated? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Ek wil ook Afrikaans praat. Onze Vader wat in de hemel is. So thank you so much to the previous speaker. Whenever we come to the community, we generally get you know, a sense something is falling apart and people are frustrated. And there's something to be said about coalition governance crises that we are experiencing. For the first time in a very long time, you now have the political class frustrated because they are in a position of power, but powerless. Which is what society has been saying, which is what people have been saying, that you say that we are the people who are, the people shall govern, but we don't feel like we are governing. So now, for a moment, the political class is feeling that they are becoming more and more powerless. So I really want for that pain to settle for a moment. The reason I am saying, and I'm using the term pain, is then we can ask the question and the purpose of ethics and morals. Because fundamentally, ethics are supposed to lessen the pain that people are feeling. That is why I have to be good to you, because it doesn't please me that you are experiencing pain. It hurts me that you are hurting. And society has been saying this over and over again in different ways, like we've experienced. But let the pain settle to those that are in power a little bit longer, so that then we can talk about the question of ethics and morals. Why do we need these ethics? I'm a driver and my car is hurting in the streets. Amatayara yaqabuka. I have abantwana and basesikolweni there's crime. Ukuhlohlwa kwabo abahlohleki okanye abahlohlwa itishara azikho seklasini. Pain, there's a pain that we are articulating, but I understand, I view. And this question of coalition, I think, mhlambi masiyibeke nangolo hlobo ukuthi for a moment the political class is losing its power. Lastly, onendlebeke makeve ndava umama uEpinet Mbeki esithi, one of the few speeches she said, she made before she passed on, I think it was around 2014. It was here in Gqeberha. She said, part of the frustration that people are feeling is that people know they are leaders amongst them, but they can't put them in power because there's a political veil, a facade. We have to appoint this political party, and then the political party elects its own leaders.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. All right. I want to see, I'll come to the side of the room and to the front shortly. Are there any hands on this side of the room? Okay. Please get, if you can get one microphone to this gentleman in the cap and another one to the one in the hat, just right at the back on the other end of the room. Thank you so much.
Goeiemiddag Kitty. Ek is nou eintlik Afrikaans. Ek verstaan nou nie Engels nie. So ek wil julle almal my gaan maar verskoon. Wat ek net graag wil onder die aandag bring, ek luister nou so na die program en dit raak my so, want regtig waar ons word uitgeskakel. Ons weet niks wat gaan aan rondom ons nie. En die mense wat daar is, wat so kom klop aan ons deur om te sê ons moet stempel, ons sien hulle net hy tyd. En na die tyd sien ons nie meer die mense nie, maar ons het ook probleme in ons huise in, met ons kinders, en wanneer ons gaan na hulle toe vir raad en vir help, dan is die selfe mense wat hulle rigte gee vir ons. Ek onthou nou een keer, het ek en my vrou gegaan tot by die burgemeester. En die burgemeester het gekom by Soortlyk en ons het die burgemeester gevra, omdat ek siek geraak het by die werk, het ek my werk verloor, en ek het kinders en daar was geen inkomste, en my dogtertjie, sy nie haar gebruik wat die vrouens gebruik, en sy kon nie skool toe gaan nie, want as die inkomste om het te dekkie, as die kos in die huis gewees nie, en hulle het skool verlaat, en ek het gaan vir hulp, by die burgemeester, by die councillors, als het 'n food parcel, als het enige iets, maar dit het niks hulp gekom van geen kant af. Ek was so ver gegaan tot by social worker. Baie van my kinders moes uit die skool uit gaan op rede van my siekte, wat ek nie meer kos werkie, want ek het siek geraak by die werk, toe kon ek nie meer werkie, en op dit het my hele lewe het verander. Ek het eintlik seer, as ek hoor van politiek, dan wil ek wil eens hê my huis moet daarna toe gaan nie, want hulle het my seer gemaak, 'n seer wat ek dink nie sal sommer gesond raak nie. Want ek het so baie drome vir my kinders gehad, maar weens my siekte het al my kinders se drome ineengestort. En ek sien nie hoe 'n mens dit weer kan fiksie. Verstaan nie, want tyd wat verby is, kan 'n mens mos nou nie weer gaan terughaal nie. Verstaan nie, so ek dink ek sal vir die res van my lewe sit en leef met daai pyn. Verstaan nie, so ek wil net graag hoor vandag, waar kan ons gaan om meer te kan uitvind? Wie is die mense dan wat ons kan help? Ons wat regtig waar help soek. Waar kan ons gaan? Want gaan ons by die councillors, dan sê die councillors vir hulle, gaan terugkom namens, los jou selfoonnommer en vul in die vorm, en hulle kom nooit terug na ons toe nie, ons bly op die selle, en in die tyd raak die probleem net al hoe groter en groter, en ons gaan net al hoe agtertoe en agtertoe. Dat sal al wees, dankie.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it's a very personal account of what it's like to live in a system that is unresponsive. You know, my brother there, for those that need a little bit of translation, is sharing the story of why he has become, some may describe it as disillusioned, some may describe it as disassociated with the political system. He doesn't see what the benefit and the use of getting involved in, because oftentimes you'll see these councillors, politicians, when it's time for elections, but when you actually need them, they're nowhere to be found. And he spoke about his journey being unemployed and having to go with his children and his wife to seek help, needing food parcels, child's got to go to school, but nobody is there. And he's hurt. He's hurt. He says that I don't want to get involved because I've been hurt by the politicians. I don't know who can fix the situation. Where can we go? And that's a today question, right? He's saying, here I am. This is my situation. Where can I go today where I can get help for my situation and where I am? Who are the people that are going to help me today? And this is part of why, when there are elections held, I don't get involved, because I'm still living with that pain of not getting assistance. I think I've covered it. All right, thank you. I told you I can speak Afrikaans. Yes, sir.
Must I stand again? Kai kuchup, tiragea, akama. I was watching you now interpreting Afrikaans. Let me see how good are you in the indigenous language. Tiragea, ngakama, gahop kingas. No, I was saying I am. I was introducing myself. I say my name. Kai rekena, kai ayo. Hamti sadunaha. Oh, you don't agree now? All right. Let me start by saying this. I've counted the people here inside, and I came late, so please forgive me if I repeat something that was said already before. And I'm a wise man. I'm not a fool. Fools talk because they want to say something, and I'm not a fool. So forgive me if I say something that was already said before. I've counted, there are 76 people here, excluding the panel. 45 of the 76 are descendants of the Khoi and the San. Are we invited to be a window dressing of this specific dialogue? God forbid. And I will never allow that. I'm a paramount chief of the Karamakais Tosasip group in the Eastern Cape. And all these people sitting here are representing me. I told Mr. Osher I will be late because I came from Somerset East. And my concern is directed to my brother Sonwabo from Salga. This is my concern. I really thank my forebearers who really fought against apartheid so that we as a people can have the freedom of choice to stand here. Nowhere before the democratic society or dispensation we could stand and dialogue like this. We must really thank the ANC and the PA. No. Remember, the EFF was not there at that time. So don't come and claim low-hanging fruits which is not yours. We must thank the PAC. We must thank AZAPO. We must even thank the IFP, whatever role they played that time. But I'm saying we must thank the ones who made it possible for us to be here in this sphere of freedom. Once again, I thank them for that. But if we look at EFF, which is a child of the ANC, if we look at COPE, which came from the ANC, when we look even now, there's a new party from Comrades Ace Magashule, it's also coming from the ANC. Something went wrong. We have to go revisit, because it can't be that you look at me, you think I'm a colored. I'm not a colored. Please look at me again and listen to my voice. I am not a colored. Your treatment towards me is based on your perception about me. And because you think I'm a colored, you treat me like I'm not from up. The government gazette says a colored is neither a native and is neither white. What is a native? A native in Afrikaans is a inboorling. In other words, you were born, bred, and buttered here. The government gazette says I'm not from here. That's why I'm treated like this. I'm seated here. 45 of the participants here are all descendants of the Khoi and the San. I have 1 minute left. So when we look at coalitions, my brother Sonwabo, coalitions don't work. You can see for yourself, it doesn't work. We must go out in 2024 and correct this unjust of the present. Because the parties that fought for this freedom some time ago are seeing now it doesn't work. Because they wanted to give everyone a freedom of choice. Look now, the IEC said there are 600 registered parties. Oh my God. Just imagine we have over 100 on the ballot paper next year. You will have 3 pages stapled against each other. We will be so confused because there's a party called AIM. I'm not saying, please forgive me if I mention the names. I'm just saying, AIM, ATM, 80-something, AC. We don't know because all the colors are looking like black and yellow and green and all the colors are looking the same. They are confusing the voters because the mama and the gogo, the young boy, they're all like me who are impartially blind. We are colorblind. We just see one color. We see black, we see green, we see gold. We thought we are voting for a party that liberated us, and then we voted for something else.
All right, Chief.
So Salga, please work on this thing. This is not working. Coalitions are not working. Something went wrong. Go back to the parties that fought for this freedom because something went wrong. The time when the UDF was there, when the African National Congress was banned, it was us who fight for this freedom. The former president, Thabo Mbeki, said, this country is keeping an audible silence on these things.
All right.
Open your mouth. Start talking about these things. We are here. We're going nowhere. And we are part and parcel of moving forward.
Thank you so much, Chief. I don't know if it's a Salga problem to solve, though. Can I get the microphones? Yes, sir. I'll take you quickly. And then if you can bring the microphone to the front, please. There's a gentleman who's had his hand up for a while. Yes, sir.
Thank you for recognizing me. He was not speaking for me, Mrs. Kathy. I think from my neighbor here and the other political parties and all those kind of persons that have raised their voice, we were just repeating what the panel was saying. But the people that have started speaking is from the people on the ground. The challenges that we are faced with is the voice of the people down there, which Nelson Mandela University must be applauded for this opportunity. If we look inside this room, the paramountship, with all due respect, he mentions that there's 45 people, percent of the people present here represented as Khoi. My worry as I was looking around this room was a question of the people from UTNIC, a question of the people from Dispatch, a question of the people from Motherwell that are not here in this very important discussion. A lot of work needs to be done so that we can get this on the ground and make it workable. Coalition governments, honestly speaking, will depend on what the people want to see happening at the end of the day, of making sure that the representatives are doing what they are supposed to be doing, whether it's a collective governance or whatsoever, but we, the people on the ground, in order for them to stop all these demonstrations, demolition of infrastructure and many other stuff, they need to be practically involved. And let's change and educate as much as possible what is governance about, which is only about service delivery at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. We'll come to the front now. And I think this will be our final contribution from the floor before I give our discussants an opportunity to respond briefly, and then we move over to the official response that will come from Dr. Ongama Mtimka.
Let me greet you by saying in my indigenous language, Kaikuhup, Kikona Paramount Chief Karet. I'm from the Katskorana Royal House. I'm the principal leader of the senior Khoisan leader in the Eastern Cape. As you listen to all this, how the program was run the whole day, I think one thing, the system has failed us. It's now election day, and a lot of people running around looking for voters to vote for their party. But it's actually us that's sitting here that have the right to make the cross. And some of us are going to be bribed by food parcels. We know how the system is working. Vote for me and I give you a food parcel. Vote for me, I can give you a house. These things never happened. Yesterday, I visited the government building in town. I start from the sixth floor, floor number 6, and I ended up by floor number 8. 8 offices I went in just to asking one question. 8 offices. Nobody on that floor can tell me the right story. They rather give me an online number because it doesn't know what I'm looking for. The system has failed us. We're putting people in positions like our councillors by voting them by a food parcel. He's not competent to be a council. Who will make that choice? Us. Because another food parcel can come to my door. I started a soup kitchen in my area 2 weeks ago. And yesterday I couldn't provide the community, and I was feeling so sad. Oh. And A little child came to my door. He said, "Hi, uncle, why? Hoekom jy die kos gemaak nie?" I failed him. Because I cannot go and knock on the door of some officers and say, "Help me." Because how many times I did it? I failed. They failed me. Even service delivery in our area, they failed us. But every time we go into the voting station and make that mark. I'm leading a Corona nation in this Eastern Cape. And I'm sitting with powers for my nation to tell them what to do. And yes, I can convince them to listen to me and say, this time is the end. You're not going to do it again. Because here, I'm waiting for recognition as a Khoisan traditional leader. And I still have to wait because I'm not proved and recognized. But in my community, when it's coming to the election time, 1 minute left, to the election time, I have powers to tell them, my people, listen to me, don't do it again. So-called colored, don't do it again because they will fail you again. It's up to me today to make that system or to put a new system in place. I can speak 2 indigenous languages. But there's something, and I don't know why my chief didn't mention it. He likes saying in his speeches. They call it, it means the power belongs to us to make that mark again. But really, people, I will burn my purple. I'm the purple. If everybody needs purple, take my number. I'm the purple guy, and if you need purple, I will bring to you so that we can make a change in this country, really.
Thank you so much. All right, ma'am, I'll make one exception for you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Can I stand like this over here? Meneer, sien my ook raak agter hoor. Just look at me. I'm Mrs. Gou, Elizabeth Gou. I'm married to a Xhosa man, he's Chesi. Hi, thank you, Mr. Eric Nose, for inviting us over here. The reason why I was hoping there was going to be a second chance, but so I gave everybody the opportunity, and thank you. They say saving the best for last. Sir, I'm from Missionville. I stay right here at the bottom, born, raised in the dusty streets of Missionville. Allow me a little 1-2 more minutes, ma'am. I just want to tell you something that's very dear to my heart. Sir, meneer, me and my husband, Andile Gou, we both resigned from the municipality. I 2020, he 2021, we bought an RDP house, it was in a very bad state. We're at the bottom where the council's office are for Ward 31, Mr. Teslin Boyson. I'm residing on that side opposite the UCC church. We're running a foundation called the House of Bethel Care Haven. Started from our very own resources. Today, we've run broke. Bank accounts with 0. From where we was, if you can one day maybe make it down there, Mr. Nose, whoever wants to come and see, you will see it. Our hard-earned money, the money that we needed to survive right now, because we are in we are in trying times. COVID destroyed families. If I can tell you in this day and age, I cry for my people to find that a woman having 5 or 6 children, she lost her last baby, now she's left with 5. No ID document. In this day and age, our people are still not having an ID document. My twins were like kicked out of school. I had to take them to Park Drive. You know the education department in Park Drive where they run tests, psychometric testing. My children got a 80 and 82% pass rate. What happened then? When I took them to Siaya, because to the principal at the previously Model C school, Celia High, told me I'm raping my children's brain by putting them at, because they're coming from Missionvale Primary. Because there's this mentality that goes with, if you are coming from Missionvale Primary, you're no good for the big, or for the greater schools, whatsoever they call themselves. Ek is nie highly educated in English, nie, but I'm trying. So now I'm taking them, and what happened after that? COVID kicked in. My twins were so young. They were 14. And they had to wait until they were 16 for CIA to accept them. That means 2 years they'll have to be at home. What will happen to your girl child when you at work? They sal diba na, de chotsi phandle. Met hy skolia buitekant. Maak jou kind swanger. It happened to my one twin. At 17 years she became a mom. After that, I had to do everything like text numbers and whatsoever. This is the plight of Missionvale, and I think in the whole of the metro, we are having this right now. Our boy child standing at the shop, street corner, scarreling. Call it scarrel is a vet, 2 rand, 5 rand, so that they can survive. Today, House of Bethel Haven is there. We've come up with something that my husband even went so far that we ended up in the mayor's office where we presented this, and they couldn't even stand it because the councillor on many occasions never pitched for a meeting with us, because we brought something to the table, how to elevate crime in our areas, how to bring these boys that has become like isolated now in society. They are, you look at them, it's kids that are coming from high school that have matric and whatsoever, and they can't find a job. They sit at home. Next thing, drugs. Next thing, raping our girl child. Your child fall pregnant. I am a mother of 5. I have 2 boys, 3 girls. And in that 3 girls, the twins, the one, thank you, Mr. Go, that you are only arriving now. That's my husband, thank you so much. And having another, the other twin now falling pregnant, they're 21 now. They never reached that potential to even go to CIA because COVID came, like I said, they couldn't go to ICANN. Now my twins are fighting me. But the principal that kicked them out of school, and when I went back to the education department, told me, ma'am, we can't do anything because they're already taken out of school, so that means our hands are cut off. Today, I'm sitting with twin girls of 21 years who only passed their grade 8.
Sure.
It's painful. And the plight and the fight of me and my husband is today to see those dropouts or those that are not or were not given the opportunity to get educated or become educated, a platform or an opportunity to become something and make something of their lives. If there's anyone in this building today that wants to know more, House of Bethel Haven, we've got it. I've a POE on Facebook. I go with it. Unfortunately, for the past, our last meal was the 30th of September. No more food, because we also need to look after ourselves. And if no one is looking at us or after us, how can we sustain House of Bethel?
All right.
So thank you so much for this opportunity.
All right. Thank you so much. Sure. What a story. I must say, I am completely speechless. And lack of functionality has consequences on people's lives. These are real people with real lives whose destiny has been changed. The course of their lives has been changed because a few people in the system decided that they were not going to do what was right. I've never heard of a brain being raped. That is an example or a reason that you got as an official reason for your children not being in school is an absolute indictment on those officials and the system that enables them to say things like that and get away with it. All right. I'm going to ask our panelists to please give their responding and concluding remarks. I'm going to ask that we keep it as short as possible. I don't want to run too far over the program. And then we'll hand over to our official respondent. Ntate Sonabo, I'll begin with you. Or you want to go last this time? All right, maybe let me begin with Mr. Mongameli.
Thank you, Katie. There's not much to be said. Abanesazela bakuva. Those who have conscience will heed the call. There is commonality here. We are called upon, all of us, to take charge. We are called upon, all of us, to reign on ourselves, to reign on the politician, to do that which is right. Reality have shown it's not about talking then. It's about practically, realistically taking our power back as communities. We don't need to go the how part. That much have been said. There is what is called a social compact. And I think that should be a taker to process for those of us in the civil society space. So that among the agenda items as we pursue stability of our city, we should have a proviso post the stability, if at all, so that you have a guaranteed engagement and interface in a structured manner. Of course, social compact is not about pen and paper. It requires a conscience that is working and ethics, values, and all of that. But that's what, from talking from a point of view of civil society, we should ensure institutionalization of those 3 legs that you spoke to, SOPs. Thanks for what I will regard as honest expression of things from the participant, particularly those that are councillors. I think I'm noting 2 of them. I was impressed with how the colleagues have responded, you know, in their individual, I will argue, capacity. Yeah, was compromise money. I think that is quite encouraging. Overall, there is not much to say, albeit I want to avoid any repetition of what have already been said. Thank you very much.
Right, so thank you, Monga. My heart is heavy. Like, my heart is very, very heavy. And I have to fight very hard to hold back tears. I'll tell you one thing. What we've heard here is just a glimpse of the extent of the structural violence that the poor in our country are subjected to. Extreme levels of poverty is violent. It's extremely violent. The story Utate Besibalisa, that's violent. And he is subjected to it as a result of a system that's failing him. And democracy fails when it is unable to shift material conditions of the people in that system. So we can't talk about the strengthening of democracy or anything in a context where a majority of our citizens are languishing in extreme levels of poverty. And so I did speak to the socio-economic conditions and how they've translated to the post-2016 political culture, which has translated to the kinds of things that we're seeing in coalition-led municipalities. And the greater the budget, the greater the chaos, and the greater the instability. That's the trend. Of course, we are watching the city of Cape Town because it seems to be resisting it. But then again, it's always been in a coalition, and the parties in a coalition kind of have like a system of running that coalition. But it's only a matter of time before the trend impacts them as well, and so we're watching that space. Councillor Mani, what you're speaking to is a need for complete reform of our electoral system. And part of our story with the court challenges around the electoral system has been to call for complete reform of the electoral system. Unfortunately, we're at a place now because we need to go to a national election where the minority report that came from an advisory committee of the Minister of Home Affairs, the minority view that he went with and Parliament went with, that minority view has delivered for us independent candidates and all of the kind of things that we have. It has not reformed at all the electoral system. And if our electoral system is birthing for us the kind of climate that we have, where you have 600 political parties contesting elections and you can likely have 3,000 contesting elections, there's something to be said there about the quality of the public leader and what that translates to. And lastly, as I land, so our electoral system as it stands will undoubtedly deliver for us coalitions. It's just the nature of the beast. The way that it is, whether it is this election or the next one, it will deliver for us a coalition because dominant political parties are falling generally across board. The rise of new ideas, populist ideas, young people that think outside of the box will deliver for us alternatives. And whether, even if we were to mobilize everybody on the voter roll to vote, the likelihood is that we will emerge with a picture that's similar to what we have at some point. It's just a mathematical equation thing. And so the mobilizing needs to happen because we all have to be responsible citizens and we must be responsible. However, that does not guarantee that we're not going to have a coalition. So we still need to fix the framework, the principle, and all of the kinds of things that we're talking about.
All right, thank you so much. Ntate Sonwabo?
Thanks, thanks, Faith, for this opportunity. Maybe once
I'll
more.
put the timer next to you.
Good luck. And maybe thanks to the center for this conversation. Perhaps I think what you should hear from the reflections of participants is that this should have been highly publicized. This should have been made bigger, and we need more of these. Nondando will tell you, in my previous job in the national office, I crisscrossed the country to engage with civil society. So I declared upfront that I want to tell you as it is. So if you don't like me after my input, that's fine, I will have done my job. And the theme was that, why have you been asleep? And they were angry. They were angry, and I was fine with that. I'd done my job. So we can go on and on. You see the point that you were making about speaking in council. That again is in law. It's in section 129 of the Municipal Finance Management Act. It's there in law. That there's a decision you don't like that a council has made. There's a provision in law. Section 62 of the Municipal Systems Act says you can instruct the council to go back and review that decision. If they don't, you can take them to court. But the problem with all of these regulatory instruments is that they are only a preserve of those who can afford to take government to court. They are made available to us as options in the context where even the NGO sector has actually become an elitist domain itself. I'm looking forward to more civil society formations like those that are very instrumental, very localized. So the burning question is, what is it that needs to be done? So I will try within my remaining 10 minutes.
2 minutes.
I think when we started this transition post 1994, we all realized that we could achieve the 1994 breakthrough because we were angry enough, and that we were able to create an alternative system to the state. Maybe we are not angry enough to create that alternative platform. So UDF was the other platform. So I know you will talk about networked spaces. And I'm arguing that we need to revive that discussion. Because the moment you want to talk regime change, you are reducing citizens into voters. And that's where the problem lies. We want citizens to be active players in the affairs of the state. So I want to list a few things because we need to sustain this conversation. Please bear with me.
Yes, we are running behind program.
Okay.
So I cannot give you any more time than what you have. So literally 2 more minutes and then I'll have to wrap you up.
That's fine. So we funded civic education at the beginning. What happened to that funding? The big question remains. So let's go back to funding the civic education. Let's go back to the original form where we had an enhanced authority of constituencies to elect and recall ward councillors. If you do that, they will take the mandate from constituencies on how do we vote in council. And that means the end of party caucus. We need a minimum competency framework for political office bearers so that you don't have a standard 2 mayor or a sub-A speaker. We need to professionalize local government, and that may mean having an independent authority that appoints senior managers in local government. When the deputy minister was a mayor in the city of Johannesburg, and I was a specialist for municipal governance then, we established an integrity commission that looked at the behavior of councillors. So let's consider that. We established a city ombuds so that you can have a municipal ombudsman so that you look at civil service delivery complaints from citizens. We established an appeals authority, and perhaps the question is, can we make this appeals authority to have community representatives? Is there in law? Let's reclaim audit committees from professionals and make them audit committees of Nelson Mandela Bay and create an opportunity for them to report to the public. I'm trying to manage your time in the process. I still think, Faith, you guys are not helping us. Kathy, sorry. Kathy. I still think that, you see, the problem with national conversations is that they get framed by those who hold the mic. That's the reality. You still have to help us to have a conversation in South Africa as to who is my ideal South African? Who is my ideal leader in terms of a couple of common values that define us?
All right.
Lastly, we need to make coalition agreements public documents. It's not about circulating them. So as soon as political parties, that's why I was talking about the notion of sitting together, standing apart. The moment they say, this is our agreement, let's make it a bylaw, and let representatives of organized communities, as the Constitution expects, be signatories to that. You make it a bylaw.
Mr. Sonova, no, I'm going to have to let you leave it there.
You need to rethink the funding model of NGOs, because what's happening now, because you need to deal with this space. You need to rethink the funding model of NGOs and civil society. At the moment, it's elitist driven. And that's why billions of rands are going to court, not to those NGOs, not to that house. That's the problem that we have. It's not a state issue only. So we have a problem there. Thank you very much. let's rethink the recall laws of public representatives. Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
All right, let's give our panelists a round of applause, please. Thank you all for your participation. I think on that note, I'm going to invite onto the stage Dr. Ongama Mtimka to come and give us at least his official response and suggestions to the conversations. And give yourselves a round of applause, by the way. That engagement was really honest and robust, and it went a long way in helping understand the issues.
Thank you so much to you and your panel for those insightful inputs. I tried as much as I could to capture them, and also thanks to the participants or the community at large for participating. I'm trying to project a screen because I think in graphs and tables. So I think it will help me if I can, can we get the front lights off? They're already off. Maybe these ones too. I'm going to do a quick summary, colleagues, in terms of the input that's been presented here today. One, there's been, and in fact, the panelists actually made my job easy by recapping on what they said. So I'm not going to dwell much on this slide. So here, there's our diagnosis, or their diagnosis together with yourselves, is that there's a problem with the structure, and therefore there's been suggestions made in terms of what we can do to resolve that problem. There's been an issue of agency that has been cited, that we have a problem with agency, and the various agencies has been stated. And then lastly, a comment which when it started, I was listening very carefully there, Mhlaba, whether you are going to take us back to, the glorification of the revolution. And I liked how you've then narrowed down. And I was thinking you want us to go back to Kongi Song. And I saw that in your analysis, you're actually including all of them who have now become problematic now. Not our historic enemy, but our current enemy, if you like, I dare say. So on the structure, we've spoken about qualifying criteria. Let me talk to you, let me challenge you while you don't have a chance to respond, Brasobs. So you're talking about the need to introduce qualifying criteria for politicians, right? In order, and that is an interesting idea. But you then, when it comes to the audit function, the audit function, you are talking about a process of taking away from the professionals and bringing it back to communities. This is interesting, and in fact, it reminds me of the philosopher King's argument, ka Plato. Okay, so we want qualified people to lead. There's a book by, and in fact, this is one of the things I wanted to say. There's a book by Stephen Friedman that talks about power. I'm forgetting the title. It's got a green cover, and power in action, but he explores this question of, I think what you were saying when I put Sonaba, that we're in a phase of an evolving and consolidating democracy, right? Now, he talks about the idea, and I think I heard also now and then to talk about popular sovereignty. The idea of governing or handling government such that it delivers the outcomes that society wants, the people want. Not government to deliver the outcomes of elite interests or business interests or organized groups. So the big question of democracy, and Stephen Friedman argues this point, that we can talk about democratic consolidation. And when we talk about democratic consolidation and the idea of the only game in town, we mean government can be changed through democratic means. And we say that democracy is consolidated. But that democracy is not consolidated until substantively government delivers to the popular will. what the people want, right? And how you get government to deliver to what the people want are some of the things that you have highlighted, and I'm going to highlight quickly in the next slide. So anyway, qualifying criteria. Stephen Friedman makes many examples of how disastrous the educated elite have led the world, not just South Africa alone, to argue the point that there is nothing about education per se that delivers great results. Per se, education per se. And competency is not assumed. Who delivered state capture? I mean, if you think about, sorry to use the name of Brian. Brian is among the creme de la creme of the Treasury boys during the Mbeki's time. And then there's a change of emphasis in terms of what's important in government. And creme de la creme becomes not. If you look at all the people, the chartered accountants, the Ntoni, it shows that there is nothing substantively. I'm a strong believer in introducing some qualifying criteria, but it has been proven that it's not education per se that is our salvation. It's somewhere between education, integrity, and commitment to the popular will. And the popular will is what makes me to be able to say, I am the city manager, the instruction from whether it's, okay, let me not call the houses of political party, the instruction from the regional office, from the office of the secretary or the chairperson, is that in a particular tender, I must appoint so-and-so. And I know that so-and-so is not going to deliver the best outcome for the people. A person committed to the popular will, educated or not, is going to be able to say, no, we cannot do what you want. We had an executive mayor there here. At the time that he was mayor, I know he's went on to study and be, at the time that he was mayor and getting instructions from his comrades to say, do this in that tender, he was saying, no, there's no way we're going to do this. The party system made sure that that person is removed from government. So while I support the idea of fiddling with the structure by introducing some qualifying criteria, let us not lose the essence of what our constitution is about. By the way, our societies know who the competent are. If you go to any community and you ask for who can be chosen to manage finances, in fact, I was having this in a debate where a person was presenting a paper about imigalelo and how imigalelo don't have systems. And I said to them, you are mistaken, imigalelo have systems. The women's savings clubs, the community has got competencies to know who can be trusted to handle imali yomgalelo and who cannot. It's an inbuilt mechanism of determining quality and integrity and potential to lead. So if we went in a community and say, tell us who can lead imigalelo the best and handle and administer finances the best, and we are going to be told, I don't even go to so-and-so, go to so-and-so. Now there's a system, the point I'm making is, if we are able to democratize, in the spirit of decoloniality, if we are able to democratize processes of selecting the qualified and include principles that we gain from even communities, we'll be able to actually come up with something that's not going to be exclusionary. We don't want, and I'm saying the very same principle that informs the thinking about taking away the professional auditor must be the same thought process that talks to how we choose the politician. I'm not going to talk about everything else on the slide because here is what you yourselves were talking about. Let me quickly point to this. For me, how much more time do I have? I know we are running over time. 10 minutes, okay. Sure. Okay, okay, yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, let me see if I can do this in 2 minutes, 3. So here, because I want to talk to that issue of non-participation and agency, I thought, let me put out here, what are the ways in which communities engage with government? Okay, in the one column, I put relations. What's the nature of the relationship? Here, what is the mode of engaging? And then in the last one, my sense of where that is. On the left, first of all, we interact with government and municipalities in particular as individual and collective users of their services. How do we do it? Through customer care centers and councillors' offices and line departments. So if you don't have electricity, you are going to go to the customer care center, but you're also going to go to the electricity department or your councillor, right? What is the issue with this? The issue is that we experience municipal or public services individually and sometimes collectively. The reason why we have limited participation in collective structures is that for the longest time, citizens interpret their reality and how they interact with government from the perspective of, okay, it's just me, I don't have money to pay for this, I'm going to have it next week. By the time they realize, no man, there's just too many of us who are experiencing financial issues to such an extent that what I thought was my individual problem is in fact a collective issue. Then only then do we become angry enough to start taking action. So, for example, generations of post-apartheid students, including myself, went through the exclusive practices in higher education until in 2015, 2016, the fees must fall activists of the time making what was otherwise individual and family experience to become collective experience. Then all of a sudden we were asking ourselves, but how did we allow this system to brutalize us this much and go through it? The reason is we had not yet gotten to that stage where we could see our individual struggles as part of a collective experience, such that we would want to take collective action. This is the challenge with this thing. Anyway, since it's come up today, let me end with this one. You see, we also relate with municipalities or government as co-creators of value and deliverers of services. That's my way of talking about what Usisi was standing here talking about, and Usisi at the back, that was saying, we help add value and service communities, right? And this is where the civil of the civil society is. The challenge with them is that they are elitist, precisely because the system compels them to be elitist in order to get funding. So, for example, there's grant in aid, which I don't know if other municipalities do, but Nelson Mandela Bay used to have grant in aid. Okay, Upramonga can say whether or not that's still effective. And then Department of Social Development and private funding. Here is the issue. There has been a lot of money to fund civil society organizations, those that are politically oriented or those that are service oriented. The challenge is that we do not prepare in terms of organization building to have a credible organization that can attract funding, that can be funding ready. And unfortunately, we are in a culture where your heart is not enough, your passion is not enough, your sacrifice is not enough. So during COVID, you had lots of people that were calling me, because I used to register organization. Hey, Ongama, auna organization, auna NPO, dormant, because I have access to funding. and I need this NPO that's dormant? And the answer would be, why do you need an NPO that's dormant? Because you know that you have ear to connections that can give funding. If you go to your community now, you will find passionate women, mostly, who are not running dormant organizations. They are running organizations that are providing a crucial service, except that they don't have connections. And therefore, your connection that wants to give you money if you can find a dormant organization should actually, in fact, be finding this organization, these many organizations that are working in communities. Anyway, long story short, on the participation plan, how many of us here have attended this year a public participation meeting for a budgeting process of the municipality? They should be starting in September. In September, we should be having the municipality going to communities with to prepare the draft budget, which is going to be completed in April. Any of us, okay, how many of us heard or got information that there was a call for those public participation meetings, including the councillors? Janbal or non-Janbal? Okay. Okay, heard. So there isn't as much as hearing in this room. I also didn't hear when there was a public participation for the budget. Therein lies our problem. Not only do we fail to participate, but the communication doesn't reach people. When I used to be in the Department of Communications, they used to be full, these public participation meetings, but they were politicized. They were full of people who had been there because the governing party was mobilizing and putting a lot of money to mobilization. But over time, you get so not focused on your job that even the mobilization to have the meeting is shied away from. And as a result of that, participation platforms get limited. So let's go back to actually taking let's take responsibility, let's take our agency seriously and participate in the process. The problem of participation is proven since Plato's time, since the first, in fact, before the Common Era, where there were so few who participated in democratic processes. Haile Selassie is said to have said, throughout history, it has been the inaction of those who should have acted, the indifference of those who should have known better, and the silence of the voice of justice when it mattered most that have made it possible for evil to triumph. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mdimka. I think the next time I come to the NMU, I'm going to have a stick in my hand. And it's just going to be so that I can hit the microphone out of people's hands. On that note, I'm going to ask that we get to the last item on our program today. And I think today is really an example of how much appetite and thirst there is for deliberations of this nature. And so I echo the sentiment that says, the more of these, the better, so that people's voices can truly be heard. She's already up on stage, but we'll give her a round of applause anyway. Professor Nomalanga Mkhize.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm representing my boss, and the issue of appetite and thirst is very important to me because I'm a mother. So the team will be bringing the food, and I'd like them to actually start coming down with the food so that when we do participation in these events, we don't do them on an empty stomach. It's very important. I think it's un-African to starve. So with that, thank you so much, colleagues. I want to just say the thank yous in reverse order and thank the community first. And that means the community that is around Missionville and those who have come from far all the way to be here. And so the protocol will start with the people this time. So thank you, and thank you also to the various clans and Khoisan Aboriginal ancestral community leaders that have come here as well, making sure that these issues are intertwined with the issues of our identity and who we are. Democracy has nothing to do with the ballot box. Democracy has something to do with who our people are and who our people want to be. So with that, I'd like to thank the leadership that has brought people here. Thank you to, then who should be next? The Bible says the first will be the last and the last shall be first. So thank you to the baby that was here in this room and the mother that came all the way here. So thank you for the community leaders, for the NGOs that don't get the big money that were here. So thank you for that. I would like to then collectively say a deep appreciation to our guest who came all the way from another province, from another part of the country to actually engage, and to our panelists who made this effort to be here. Please, I want you to understand, your input was so extremely high, important. I learned a lot today. I would like to then extend another thanks to the campus director and her team. Thank you so much. What a beautiful campus. Thank you so much. I think there's a lot to discuss about how we need to make Mission Vale a community. All the campuses are community campuses. But there's more pressure on others to be even more community. So thank you so much for your beautiful leadership here. If there's someone I didn't thank, yes, sorry, the sound crew at the back, I would like to thank you. I see, Nomta, you've got gifts for our panelists. I'm not going to ask them to come up. I am actually that much of a mother. When people are hungry, I focus on that. So please bring those, and we will give the guests individually to thank them for coming. I'd be much more interested in seeing the people eating now. So thank you so much. There's our main guest today. So thank you so much, colleagues. Give a round of applause to everyone. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Professor Mkhize. On that note, I will say that early dinner is served. The food is available. It's going to be coming in. Will it be served in here, Nomta? All right, so the food will be served in here. Thank you all for making time to come out today. And I must echo the sentiment that this campus is absolutely gorgeous. It is stunning. All right.